I would like to request that these lights get a little dimmer and those lights get a lot brighter. I don't want to speak into an empty space. So can we bring up the house lights and bring the stage lights down so we're a little more equivalent and so that we up here can see you out there, please?
Yeah.
That's good.
That's
and bring these down a little bit because I don't want to get skin cancer.
Well, two directors. We set it up this morning with Milo. So first of all, he's the great Tania Bruguera, Cuban-American artist, I think right to say. All of you who know her, what her work stands for, and what she did, of course, Milo, and then the great Richard Schechner. And the idea... And we touched about it earlier. What shall we do? And someone in the audience said, would really like to hear, what works and what doesn't. What can theater do? And what has to be adapted and changed? Everything is changing, and that's why it stays the same. Someone said. So you left Cuba. You in exchange for 25 people who got out of prison. Tell us a bit about your work and what you think, what these New Yorkers are talking about.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me with two people I admire. One I study, and the other one I follow. And thank you so much for doing this kind of events. They are very, very needed everywhere, but also in the US. Instead of talking about my experience, I want to talk about stuff that I want to share with people because I was taking note. I first feel that you have the answer. All these people looking for, you have the answer. Everything you have said is the answer. And I feel that when you deal with dictatorship and autocrats and shameless people, one of the things that I always try to do, or the people, because it's not me, there is a big movement in Cuba of artists who are fighting the repression. What we do is to be in the present, because usually this dictator wants to be in the past or hijack your future. So I think being in the present, doing, doesn't matter if it's good, bad, I could have done it better, okay, next time you do it better, or in 20 years when they reconstruct it, you do it better, But the thing is, you have to do. And the other thing I'm a little afraid is when people try to find one solution. There is no one solution. There are many solutions because there are many different people who hear differently or need something different. So yes, humor is great. I don't like humor. But humor is great. My work is very humorous, but in a different way, not in your face. But because it's making them look bad, with what they do, force them to do something bad. But the thing is that it is the time for aesthetic revolution, Why? Because the language have to change. The language in which we talk to each other have to change. And it's nice to have our own language. We don't have to have the institutional languages. We don't have to have their language. And I think, just to finish, because I'm speaking too much, is another thing. I was very nervous a few years ago because I teach, seeing young artists so anxious about being being in the institutions, legitimized by institutions. And then my answer to them was, none of the artists you study, none of the artists you love were taken care by institutions. They were doing their own projects with some or no money, but they were the underground. So we need to become underground in their face. I don't know if I explain myself. Yeah, that's just now, and then we can keep it.
Richard, your lifespan, your work, your theories, and your teachings goes back so far. Listening to all what we say now, and taking in consideration where we are, what comes to your mind?
Well, first of all, I think what Milo gave us was brilliant, tragic, depressing. Brilliant, tragic, depressing, all at once.
Perfect.
And a little like your work, but a little different than your work, Milo's work. The last one I saw was the Antigone in the Amazon. And Milo's work enables the people he works with as well as critiquing them. So I want to say that you are more optimistic in your work than you are in your presentation to us. I also found something absent and interesting, and I'll put it in perspective. There was no mention of China, India, Africa. You were speaking basically about the European and North American part of North America that is European, because so much here is not European. But the majority of people live in the global south. And Modi is an authoritarian, no doubt. Xi Jinping is an authoritarian, no doubt. But at least Xi Jinping is in a different mode, having done a lot of work in China myself, including directing plays and workshops and so on and so forth. So I think we have to see that it is a replay of fascism, but you know, Hitler really wanted to conquer the world. He didn't even see the global south as in the world in a certain way. The world to him was, could he do what Napoleon couldn't do? Whip Russia's ass. He froze instead. He did not whip Russia's ass. So that's one thing. I don't give a solution to it, but I really want, the woman earlier on was saying the absence of the people of color in this room. So there's also an absence of the philosophy of the people of color in our performance theory, let's put it that way. I was in Cuba a long time ago, 1968, believe it or not.
The good times.
Yes. And I was able to go, if I left my passport in Mexico City, flew in a transport plane, and was a no person, because there were no relations between the US and Cuba. I was younger, obviously, and I didn't worry what might happen without a passport, etc. But I was very impressed. I had made a trip through all of the countries of Latin America, and I didn't want to not go to Cuba. And it was 1968 when there were riots in Mexico City, as well as at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and I want to say a little bit about that. I was impressed by what I experienced in Cuba at that time, which was a élan vital. Now, I'm not speaking in favor of Castro, Raul, or Fidel, or Che Guevara, whose name probably doesn't mean much to most of you. But those were the days in which Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, those were very important names, because they were talking about revolution not as a metaphor, not as a literary occupation, but as an actual physical thing. There were also people like Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and the Living Theater who were doing performances as insurrectionist acts. So what struck me in listening to you earlier and listening to your talk now is how polite all of you guys are, really. How much the civil society is deeply ingrained in you. And me too, I'm a professor after all. I'm also to some degree polite. There were times when I wasn't so polite. But that is a question that I raise, because I feel that, well, I'm not nostalgic for that other kind of radicalism, but I note it. nor do I think that the fascism we have today is identical to Hitler's fascism, as I said. I think it is much more, I look at Trump not as the leader of a movement, but as a surfer on a wave who knows how to surf pretty well, but is not the inventor of the wave. The inventor of the wave is the capitalist, corporatist, state socialist conglomeration, which includes Xi Jinping. Putin is on the outside of that to some degree, and Trump is their creature. He didn't write Mein Kampf. He's not an ideologue. He's not capable of that kind of thinking, which doesn't make him less dangerous. But the real danger is in this corporate capitalist configuration and how we address it. So to come down to earth a little bit about how we as artists, how you as an artist, how Jelinek as an artist deals with these things. First of all, there's no way anybody can be universal. We all, Euripides is not Sophocles, is not Aeschylus. We say they're Greek tragedians, but there's a world of difference between the Oresteia and its ultimate balance, and the Bacchae, which was one of the last plays written in that epoch. And of course, I have a deep association with the Bacchae through my Dionysus in '69, which was a play in which there was no resolution, no finality, no Eumenides coming out of the horror. So if the Oresteia says, look, we finally can turn the Furies into the good ones, the Bacchae is saying, I will go from town to town and wreak anarchy. Now, my old friend Julian Beck and Judith Molina, friends, would say, oh, we love anarchy. We want anarchy. Well, that's something that I throw out at you, the artists of you. Yes, a little bit of anarchy is the salsa of art. We need some of it, but not a totality of it. It's the salsa, but not the thing being salsa'd. So I have more to say, but that's my first reaction.
Well, that's a great check. Milo, before we also maybe join the discussion, tell us a little bit about that Resistance Now tour. What's the idea? How did you create it? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, to respond perhaps to the beginning, I think, of course, there's this very known saying that you should be pessimistic in your reason, but an optimist of will, no?
Right.
And I think if you are optimistic in reason, then you're just an idiot. And
Right.
I think that it's very important to make I would say, a pessimistic lecture of where we are living in, and not just saying, and I'm not 100% agreeing that the second fascism is a bit less dangerous than the first one.
No, I think it's just as dangerous, but I think it's a different.
Yeah, it's a different thing. I would say that, but most of the leaders that I know from Europe, from second fascism, like Kickl is a kind of a personality that is kind of third degree. Right. Putin is somebody, they gave him the third presidency because they never expected anything from him. They thought they can control him, but they couldn't. So it's quite interesting what is happening. And when I was like reading the situation in Europe, my let's say the starting point of the Resistance Now tour was like, you have to imagine there's Vienna and there is Bratislava. Vienna is the capital of Austria and Bratislava is from Slovakia, and we have the same airport. Oh. So you can go, you land there, and you can go to Bratislava and you can go to Vienna. And then the general director of the National Theatre, my friend Matej, and then and several other general directors were dismissed by the prime minister. There was this attack against him, and after this he became crazy and dismissed everybody and installed a nationalist regime. And when this happened to the Museum of Modern Art, etc., in Vienna nobody reacted because they said what happens in Bratislava stays in Bratislava. We were just like thinking, this is just still the Eastern Bloc. So nobody was interested, but we share the airport, I mean, you can go in 40 minutes from one city to the other. It's closer than Berlin and Potsdam. It's really like, and then I was saying, okay, we have to react on it. And then while reacting on it and reading the situation in Serbia, so my name is a Serbian name, so I have Serbian family, and reading the situation in the Czech Republic, of course Hungary is already fallen, Poland came a bit back, Russia of course is fallen, Ukraine is in war, etc. And all the Estonian, etc. states are preparing for war. And we were understanding that the right-wing parties have a kind of international collaboration. I mean, the European Union, but also like on global level, no? And then I understood we have in every country, and when I'm listening here, even in the US in a different way, we have the same problems, we have the same, however we call it. I mean, in Europe we call it fascism because it reminds us of classical fascism. Perhaps here it makes less sense to call it like this. And then we say, okay, we have to collaborate. And we have to bring, and for example, there is one taboo, let's say, in European politics, it's the artistic freedom. So the artistic freedom and the artistic policy remains to the member states. And to interfere in it is a taboo. And then we said, no, we will now make a new law, kind of that the European Union can interfere in the member states. And then we started this campaign, and we connected all the different countries in Europe, and that's how it started. Of course, now it has a lot of different levels. So what happens is that, for example, that by the reaction of Western and Central Europe to what happened in Slovakia, it's very funny that I say Central Europe, because, I mean, when you're in Europe, you go further to the east. It's, by the way, Slavoj Žižek who did a whole book about it. The further you go to the east, people think that they are in Central Europe, and the east starts in the end, you know, at the Ural. It starts always in the east. So, but that we started to collaborate, and that already, like what happens in Serbia, what happens like this kind of huge movement of the civic society, that they understand that their rulers, they will sell out their countries. They are not interested in their nations, you know, in the democratic sense of the word. So by bringing together what you could call a European civic society, make pressure on the different national states and national governments, also in Austria, helped a lot that some processes were stopped. And that's perhaps my last thing. I think resistance has to be concrete, and it was Hannah Arendt, a German philosopher, she said, you know, the state can be violent, the state has the police, etc., but the power always remains with the people. It always remains with the people, and you saw it in so many countries.
Let me ask you a very simple question. Do you have, first of all, I agree with you. My stomach says yes, my head says no.
Yeah, but that's exactly...
I have a bigger stomach than brain, so it's okay. But it's a very simple question. Do you believe in the electoral process? In other words, here we had a majority for Trump, Hungary, he got in, Poland, etc. So, and Plato in his Republic, of course, said, hey, democracy doesn't work, we need philosopher kings, that they don't really come together. But do you believe, and you, in the electoral process? We're about to have a mayor's election here, and then a congressional election, then another election. Do we believe in this process? We want to take action socially, politically, artistically, but underlying it is this voting rights thing. Do we believe in it? And what happens when, quote, the people vote in these fascists? Yes, I'll call them fascists, authoritarians, populists, whatever, these kind of people.
I will leave it to you.
I do believe in democracy, but I think in the US, I saw for the first time, I didn't see that in other places, that people punish with the vote. Like when they don't have exactly what they want before the person is in power, they sometimes don't vote, even if they're going to elect the wrong option, as a way to demonstrate the politician, we don't agree, you have to do more for us. And I feel personally that we have seen the result now of doing something like that. And I think that vote is the first step only. Like you have to elect the worst, the less worst of the worst, and then you have to work for them to do the right thing, you know? And the other thing the first time in my life that I saw free elections was the year 2000. So I was excited, I'd sit in front of the TV, popcorn, Coca-Cola, of course, and then the map, and I was like, oh, Al Gore, oh, this Trump, Bush Jr., and then I said to the friend, my roommate, hey, Gore won Miami, Florida. oh, strange. 5 minutes later, I say, oh, actually, it was Bush who won. And she was like, you don't understand democracy, you don't understand English, you don't. And then I was really impressed that after knowing that it was a real stolen election, nothing happened. For me, that was the biggest shock about democracy I had in my life, because I was like, why don't we go back? So it's interesting, the balance between people honoring the system and people taking advantage of people who honor the system. You know, so I think that's my experience here.
I will answer the question as a European. And I think, of course, in the eastern part of Europe, middle part of Europe, we have democracy since 30 years. And in half of the countries, it's already gone again. So like in old Greece, I think in the theory of the political theory of the ancient Greece, democracy was just a kind of a product to tyranny. So it was what comes before, you know? But tyranny is the thing. And I think Europe exactly believes in this. All European leaders I know, they kind of want to win the vote that it should be the last one, you know? And that's why people even vote. People vote that it is the last one, you know? So people vote to demolish democracy, and that's what you said by punishing or whatever. They want to punish the system. And the fun fact is I was like living half in Russia, half in the western part of Europe for a long time. Before it became impossible and I lost my visa. But there, all my friends, the leftists, the liberals, etc., the anarchists, whoever, Marxists, I don't know how you want to call them, they just couldn't believe that ever they would stop democracy again. Because last time they did it, it was in 1917, and then millions died. And then they did it again. And what does the autocrat do? To not lose the power, he has to start wars, no? Because if not, he will lose his power. What can he do? If he just doesn't move, they will not believe in his charisma anymore. So he started a war in Georgia, then the first Ukrainian war, that Europe just decided that it is not a war for unknown reasons. And then the second Ukrainian war where NATO and you decided that it is a war, you know? So we know what to expect. And if I answer your question, of course, me personally, and this is the optimism of my head, and of course my stomach is also much bigger than my brain, of course I believe in it, like in a belief, but when I look at European history, and history especially of the part of Europe I come from, or I live in, it never worked. Voting was, you could say even, the prologue of dictatorship and the big problem, you know? And that's what I can say about it.
Well, I think, and I am interested, Frank, when we open it to the room, whether we have, beyond the artistic situation, a crisis of faith in democracy. When I was growing up, there were several unspoken assumptions. One was that democracy, whatever it might have meant, voting, local power, and so on, was a good and permanent thing. It was kind of like lunch. I would get it at school every day, and democracy was there. I feel now many, many people are kind of outside the system conceptually and think the system doesn't work. And that's where the people who I am against and you are against, the people we are for, agree that they do not need neither side in the United States, as distinct from Europe. Neither side believes in the strength of the system. Both sides feel the system, the basic system, the courts, the fairness of the elections, etc., the electoral process is flawed. And that's a very big change over the period of my lifetime. That kind of, so you talked earlier very compellingly about the death of God in Nietzsche. We don't have a Nietzsche yet to write the death of democracy, because democracy, the democratic, we the people became God, right? That was the 18th century proposition, that God would go away, be very far away, and we the people would, be the law of the land. All right, God died or is absent, et cetera, and so forth. In other words, organized religion is put, at least in this country, to the side. Separation of church and state. But now I feel there's a crisis of that we, the people, have died. We have this silo and that silo. And one thing you did say, the beauty of or somebody said, face-to-faces of theater. Correct. But most of us live in the silos of social media. That's a huge problem because it's a huge problem because that's where people socialize. I ride on the subway, everybody's got their face in this damn thing. And that's how, you know, we make our society that way, and it's a kind of, you know, narcotic, because it feels like we're making contact, but it's not the same as I can touch you, I can reach for you, I can see you. If I got close, I could smell you. Those are, to me, decisive things, and what theater is about. I mean, when I started my environmental theater, I wanted it participatory. I wanted it inclusive. I wanted not to have I agree with you, the bourgeois drama. I did not want to have the fourth wall and those separations. But then I see the bourgeois drama existing in social media.
I would like to add to this, because I mean, it's quite interesting. We are talking about the meta level, which is democracy, God, the power, Putin, Trump, whatever, history and tragedy. And then we are talking about, I mean, really like, you know, one meeting the other. And there was, I think, a student talking about why are there not so many people of color in this room, for example. And I think this is the middle level. And this is, I think we talked about institutions too. At one point, I decided to enter institutions. I became artistic director of a theater, which is an institution that organizes these kind of meetings, you know, that is there to make hundreds, thousands of people meeting, deciding structurally who would meet and who would talk, who would sit there, who would sit here, etc., etc., etc. So I think it's super important that we don't forget that we have this middle structure. I mean, the Siegel Center, for example. I was here, and it's the second or the third time that I'm here. There are many spaces like this. We have to defend these spaces. We have to change these spaces. And I think it's really, it's like super important that we don't forget it, because we can talk a long time about the importance of democracy and the importance, like on the hyper level and on the very basic level, how important it is to look in the eyes of somebody else, to listen to him or to her, etc. But if there is no space to meet, besides, for example, social media, how could it work? So that's why I think you said we have to go to the peripheries and we have to be, you know, I completely understand what I mean. I just want to, as a counterbalance, to say we have to go to the center and defend the center to save the top and the down level.
We need to defend decency. That's what we need to defend. Decency is what we need to defend. No, but I agree with everything you say, but I don't want to demonize social media, because we need to also understand as practitioners, theater, visual artists, etc., that there is another way to exist now. It's not only touching each other, it's not only deciding I'm going to give 1 hour to be here, or 3 hours to be here, but it is a different, and I think, I understand the danger, the isolation, etc. I have felt it because I did a test with myself where I was for 3 months in the vacation, all the time in media, and I changed, you know, so I wanted to feel it. But I think we need to understand the different ways in which people exist today, and the complexity of people's existence today.
Yes, I agree, you're right. I made a mistake.
One question to all of you, because also all the time is running out.
I'm going to record that.
Yeah. Also a question from the audience earlier. You know, I came here to hear what can we really do. So to all three of you, a question. Through your experience, I mean, Milo did amazing artist-initiated project, Richard's company that led to the Wooster Group, and your teaching and writing in Tania through your work. There are many students here from, I think, NYU, from Columbia, from the New School, from the Graduate Center. In your experience, and experiences comes from failing, and failing is very important. That's what you also said. But what does work in general? What do you feel in your work, in your career? This is something what you learned.
In general, for talking to
For,
other people,
for
I
doing
will
art,
say,
for creating art.
First,
Yeah,
I
a bit
would
closer.
say, first I would say, make them crazy. Like, do everything all the time at the same time. Dictators cannot do this. They get crazy when there's so much happening because they used to have their way and everybody's in line. So work, produce all the time. Don't worry so much about it's good, bad, just do it, and in different ways, because we need to talk to everybody, not only to the people who are in your same position. And please go to the places where things are uncomfortable. This is the moment to be uncomfortable, not to seek like this or somebody giving you hugs. The hugs later. Now you need to fight. So this is the first thing. The other thing I learned in my practice is that I always try, I feel that, and I have said this before, but I feel my work is more effective when there is a time between I do it and in Cuba, the dictatorship, understand what I have done. And this is the time, whether it can be 1 day, 1 week, a month, few hours, this is the time where I can be efficient as an artist. Efficient is a bad word, but you know what I mean, like in terms of politics. Because it also forced them to go out of their comfort zone. They cannot just put you in jail. They cannot repress you, cut your phone, or put the police in the door of your house. Because it doesn't work. They don't understand really what you're doing. So the people in power also know what you're doing. Hopefully they have an old version of what you're doing. So you have to go ahead of them. So they are confused. And this is when I think we can advance a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things. I mean, in the concrete artistic work, I mean, there are a lot of things I do, and I would agree with everything you said. That's why I want to focus now a bit again on the institutional side of it, to just talk also about this. I think it has to be practical and it has to be concrete, and it has to be explicit. So it has to be clear and it has to be explicit. I give you one example. When I became artistic director of a theater in Belgium, the first thing I did, I wrote the rules of this theater on the outside wall of every house we had. So
Tell us the rules.
yeah, for example, one rule is very simple, that every citizen has the right to go to the rehearsals, and the premiere is the premiere, but you can just go. And then very often people would ask you, but can I come to the rehearsal? Students ask that, and you say, you don't have to ask me, you have the right. Or I wrote every play we do. I mean, there are more important rules, but one other was that every play we do, because we were not touring in this system, we go in 3 countries in 8 cities. And so every director and every company who would work in my theater, he can come and say, Milo, we were in three different countries, but only in 7 cities. You miss 1 city. So, because I had no rights as a director. And the most different thing, and I come from a quite humble background, so middle class, always when I went in a place like Siegel Center or the Museum of Modern Art, etc., even now I'm a bit afraid to go there, because I don't know how my body would react to it. You know what I mean, I guess. Everybody knows that. And I was
but
always...
you have power.
Yeah, I know, but I was always...
Said, yeah.
I know, but I was always disappointed that outside of this building is not written what they actually do. That's actually how Putin kind of could send Pussy Riot to the camps, because there was a big gray zone. Like half a year before they were sent to the camp, you would have got an art prize to make a punk concert in the Holy Savior Cathedral. You had the national prize. And at one point he decided, no, it's against the Orthodox rule. So you were in a gray zone. There was never written, don't make music in a because there is no rule like this, So that's problematic. And the second thing, and that's I want to make it a bit shorter, and that's what I learned from Jean-Luc Godard, a guy, a Swiss director. He died, or he suicided some time ago. He said, you can't make political films, you can make films politically. He was a filmmaker, meaning that making films
Say again?
means you should not make political films, you should make films politically. And that's the difference between drama and tragedy again, or between bourgeoisie and the kind of revolutionary Marxism, that making art means to change by the artwork the art system. With every artwork you have to change how it is distributed, who is on stage, who is representation working, who gets the author rights, who the whole institution is working, etc., etc. So with every artwork you do, you should think, how do I change how art is made? And of course you have your perspective. Mine is a Middle European perspective. Another one has, I guess, an American perspective, or you have a perspective from whatever class you come. But that's why you do political art. That's what it means.
When I do my work, I don't say it's political, I say it generates the political. Yes, because the idea is that when people are in the work or after they experience it, then there is a political dynamic that you have created through the work. And then, yeah.
So what both of my colleagues have said, I endorse. I want to add just a couple of things. It doesn't matter what kind of work you do, so much as the process of making the work. That's what they're saying. So the internal workings of your group or whatever you're working with, that's what you should democratize or devised work is very good because it's collective. I just had a book coming out, called Schechner Plays, not Schechner's Plays. And in the introduction, I talk about the difference between a writer, R-I-T-E-R, and a writer, W-R-I-G-H-T-E-R. In other words, playwrights are craftspeople. They devise, they write, they work in collaboration with. So that's a deeply political thing. And if your love is musical theater, do musical theater, because the most important thing is the process of your production, and to bring it to people, or I love the idea of the total open rehearsal. I did open rehearsals very early on in my career, that people could come. There's certain work, I will say, that I do that has to be closed. I call that the training and the workshop work. There's certain you need to devise but it comes a point where it should be open, because not only is that good for the politics of the sharing, it affects the performance. The spectators, the participants, they're the water in which the performance swims. So those are the deeply political processual things, as well as the subject matter. The other thing that you said that I agree with, if you don't feel you're uncomfortable taking a risk, not all the time, but at least some of the time, then you're not going far enough. You're not in the right direction. You should, at a certain moment, say, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Or, how will this be? That's a really good test that you're in the right direction.
Maybe, what are works of art, or especially, of course, theater and performance, that you saw, that maybe here didn't see, but that really changed you, that had such a deep impact that something happened?
Fidel Castro.
Tell more.
He was a performer. He was the best performer we had, maybe after Hitler, probably. He understood, Trump is so clumsy, and the only hope I have in this country is that the Trump administration has such a bad aesthetic ideas that I don't think they will be successful. That's my only, happiness. But I think Fidel, why? Because he understood what is the role of emotions in politics. And that's what we work with as artists, And the fact that he was saying something to a million person, and behind he was doing the opposite. So he was a great actor. And I think this idea of understanding that energy, it was not, nobody remembered what he said, to be honest. He spoke 8 hours every time. Nobody, he's in the Guinness record for more talking. He is, this is not made up. But nobody remember what he talked about, but everybody remember how they felt. And I think this is something we need to appropriate as artists. You know, people will not remember everything. You had a brilliant speech, but I remember several, but not the whole pages. But I remember how I felt when you read it. And I think that's what we need to take to our side, because dictators understand the power of collective energy. And what they are pursuing is how to manipulate it. You know, through fear, through control, whatever it is. So, but we need to reclaim as artists that, and that's what I learned. Mm-hmm. And it's true. It was not from art.
I mean, I want to give a negative example following you a bit, and then a positive one. The negative one is, of course, people like Hitler or Lenin. I think you said it. The difference of the first fascism or Bolshevism or whatever was Lenin was sitting in Switzerland reading Hegel, and he understood that the moment has come to destroy parliamentarian democracy. He went to Russia, he destroyed it, he took power. Hitler wrote a book and he did exactly what he wrote down. So this is the modernist approach. You have a theory, and then you follow the theory and you change the system. So this is very impressive to me. Even, again, it's super negative. And on a much lower scale, Bertolt Brecht or all these modernist guys did it that way. They developed a theory while, of course, working on it. It was work in progress. And when they had it, they followed it, and they kind of like, it was the way how you worked before the war, no? Another person, and that's because the next discussion will be called, I think, Theater of the Real. And then I was saying, yeah, that the first time I heard this term was by Alexander Kluge, which is a filmmaker from Germany. And he's like old like you, 90, I think, or 85 or something.
Old like me.
Yeah, but I mean, I somehow want to compare you, because for me the crazy thing was I was like 28 when he invited me the first time to his TV show. He has a TV show in private television, which is super strange, because there was in the 80s, there was a law that 1 hour per day has to be kind of highbrow cultural stuff. And because he was a lawyer, he just took this hour. And until today, this crazy figure, Alexander Kluge, who did some, you know, like really like Godard, like art house movies, makes every week 1 hour of discussion. And then he invited me, and I was like, you know, he's really a hero in our spheres. And I was like, oh my God, what will happen? And then I met him, and he was listening. He was extremely prepared. Not because he prepared himself like a technocrat, but because he was interested in. And for him, the rule was whoever comes to my show, and even if it's a 28 years old guy like you, that I don't know if you're still in the public, but one student that said I'm 27, he was listening to me like I was the first and the last one who would ever talk to him. And I was so touched, and I said, when one day I'm 80 or 85, and somebody who comes and is 25 and has nothing behind her, I want to be like Alexander Kluge, you know? So that's, because I talked about Hitler, I wanted to talk also about Alexander Kluge.
I don't want to be like Fidel Castro.
You don't have the beard. So for me, it's a very interesting question, and perhaps I'm showing my age. So the two people. One, my grandpa Schwartz. He was born in 1868. And I won't give you his biography, but he taught me Talmud. And Talmud has been very important to me, because Talmud is a debate among people through time about basic texts. For me, they sometimes can be performances, but in other words, there's never a point of view. There's never an answer. There's never a final conclusion. And since time is open, there is always room for more commentary. And the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, is organized that the core text, usually from the Old Testament, is in the center. And then the comments are arranged, they go out from there, not only chronologically, but in the sense of which is the most crucial commentary, gets closer to the text. So I like that idea of a table and a debate seminar, that going on. The second person will surprise no one, because he was to some degree almost my age, just a little bit older, but my teacher, and that's Jerzy Grotowski. So I studied with him directly. I knew him from 1963 till his death in 1999. We sometimes disagreed, but mostly agreed, and he was a, a big influence on me. And for these reasons, he was absolutely, had integrity. In other words, he really devoted himself to the relationship between the actor and what Grotowski called the actor's secure partner. It could be a Bouberry and Ishdu, you and me, an intimate relationship, or it could be within yourself, you and your past. There needed to be a performance always started with two, never one. So the relationship of the actor to herself or something, and also his notion of staging, and the notion also that you could do things for very few people will be a pebble in an infinite sea. It would make waves. So don't worry about how large your audience is, especially in this place of social media and all. We can get hundreds of thousands, millions of, quote, followers, whatever that is. It doesn't matter. The integrity of the work and who you affect, and therefore, in a sense, tradition. We are all part of a tradition, and we should be aware there is someone there, there's me here, and there is someone there. And tradition is like trade. It means to take from there, to process and do good with it and pass it on.
We're coming close to the end, and then Carol will come and talk about Theatre of the Real. But what are your projects you're working on at the moment, if you can talk about it? So what are your, in a way, actions? What's on your mind? What you're going to realize that's in the making? It could be 2, even 3. What?
Are they going to ask questions too?
I think
or
we
no?
had the big town hall, and then we don't have so much time. Yeah.
I'm working now on few things, but related to this conversation. I'm working on I've been working for a while on Galileo from Brecht, and because I really like, and I was telling Milo before, I really like the tension between the vulnerability of being a human being and the expectation of being a hero, you know? And it all started with this phrase that at some point Andrea comes, his disciple come and say, "Oh, master, I understand now why you say no and regret why. So you wanted to leave so you can write the books about your knowledge and past it, like some very heroic act, no?" And his answer is like, "No, I'm afraid of pain." So I think that dichotomy really made me approach it. And of course, my version, I cut a lot of stuff, all the parties and all the music and all of that. But yes, I'm trying to see right now, how can we understand the right, quote-unquote, right thing to do at the moment things are happening and not 10 years after? Because it's very easy after things have passed and everybody agreed I was wrong to say, "Oh no, I was against, or I did the right." So how to do the right thing in the moment where things are not so clear, and then there's stuff at stake, like a lot of things are at stake.
And you do a reality TV series with your student?
Oh no, that's my class. This is my performance class this semester, reality TV. But every week I give them an assignment about performance, but yeah. That's going to be my class this semester.
Yeah, it's like with you, and I guess with you and everybody here, I'm following different paths. One thing I will start to rehearse next week in Stockholm at the National Theatre is called Rage. It's a play I'm writing together with the actors, and it's trying to give. We will also make a movie version of it, and it's a quite simple play. It's a bit cabin in the woods style. So there is a conservative revolution in Sweden. And a group of, let's say, leftist, young and old actors. So I have a lot of actors that were still working with Ingmar Bergman, and then young ones that are only in Netflix, etc. So I made a quite funny ensemble. And the stories, they go to a vacation home, and then a right-wing militia comes. And then starts a night of terror, and of course a night of dying, and apocalypse of everything we know, and we laugh. So you could say it starts like White Lotus, and it ends like Funny Games. So it's yeah. I always wanted to give a body to what is happening in so many parts in Europe at that point. Yeah, and to express this feeling to be confronted to the apocalypse, and yeah, voila. So that's what I'm working on.
You also run the Vienna Festival, which is the largest festival in Europe.
I mean, of that kind.
Of that kind. Maybe tell a little bit what you changed and what's going to happen next year, so people might go.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say what happens next year because then a press conference will have no meaning anymore.
What did you do this year then?
This year, what we did, I mean, in the first year, what we did, we created the Free Republic of Vienna. We installed a council of the Republic, a lot of experts, a lot of citizens of the city too. Because for me, the strange thing was, as you said, it's the biggest crossover festival in Europe. So already on the opening, we have 50,000 people. So it's really big. And when I came there, they said, Milo, no, you are now the new director. Do you think the music or theater is still interesting? What do you want to do? And it was quite strange to me because when I come to, I don't know, to fix the water in New York, they would not ask to me, Milo, is water still relevant? I mean, I would check the city and see what does the city need, no? And I said, okay, I have to check the city and to find out what the city needs. And that's why we kind of completely transformed it. And we write it into the DNA and the rules of the theater, like quotas and like everything, how we want to finance it and everything. And we really go through the political work to change this big festival from top to down. And this is the good, perhaps because I was talking about institutional work and it sounds boring, but you can take it as a democratic artwork. And on the other side, today, and it's also what is dangerous, institutions are really weak. So it's not difficult to change, because people said, okay, Milo, you will arrive in Vienna. And I came from a small city theater somehow, with like 100 people working there, to a big institution. And they said, okay, this will destroy you. It's much, you know, it's a dinosaur and you are a kind of a little rabbit running. So you will be smashed by the dinosaur. And it was not the case. It was not the case, and not because I am strong or my team is strong, just because there is change needed, and it's a good moment to install change. And yeah, of course, this is like the second half of my every day is this, and I love it and I hate it, and like I think everybody who works in the institutions.
So I'm doing a lot of things, but I want to say TDR is extremely important to me. I'm editor of TDR, the Drama Review. Some of you might write. Please check it out, and I would like to publish Milo's talk. And TDR is progressive, and it is doing all the things, or trying to do all the things we are talking about here. So Sarah Brady is the managing editor. She's back there somewhere. If you're interested in learning more about it, just see us during the break. Otherwise, when COVID came, I was working on a piece called Dark Yes. It was just the start of an exploration of two texts that were weird to put together. One, Dark, The Heart of Darkness of Joseph Conrad, the journey up the river, you know, that terrible and interesting book. And the other, the Molly Bloom soliloquy, that's Yes, from James Joyce's Ulysses. I won't go into it, but there are direct links between Conrad and Joyce. So I was exploring those texts, and then COVID hit. If I finish my book projects, of which there are several, then I would like to return to that project. Bring me to Vienna, I'll do it.
Yes. Okay, so thank you
You're
very,
both
very
invited
much.
to Vienna,
and,
by the way. That's clear.
Big round of applause.